Nairobi Securities Exchange posted an increase in daily equity turnover to 753 million Kenyan shillings when day trading ended at the bourse today compared to 676 million Kenyan shillings on Thursday. For more on the NSE, we are joined by Sara Wanga, Head of Research at AIB-AXYS. Sarah, it's great having you on the show. Just give us an overview. What counters were we seeing moving the most today?
So we saw movement in Unga Group. We've seen top traders continue to be Safaricom and the banks, KCB and Equity.
Yeah,
and also BT.
Yeah. And Unga has been actually one of the biggest gainers on NSE the past 2 days. What are the interests behind this move?
So we've seen it's because of an increase in foreign investor sentiments on the counter. Last year, it reported an increase in earnings, and it's currently restructuring its business. It sold its bakery business, and so investors are positive on the outlook for 2022.
And just looking at across the Centum's counter, we're seeing it continues to be the biggest mover in the investment sector. But this is despite the unwanted attention towards the back end of last year. Has this had any impact on the investor appetite, investor sentiments?
So Centum really has lost over the past 2 years, mainly because of investors' concern about the company's portfolio. It's heavily skewed towards the real estate sector, and investors are worried about the liquidity of that portfolio. So that has been one of the reasons why it's lost. But we've seen management take action to reduce the allocation to the real estate sector. So it's in talks with a private equity firm to sell some of the stake in its real estate company. So that will be positive for investors. Actually, investors are concerned about return. So over the past few years, we've seen the company last year, it reduced the dividends, and investors are concerned about return. So going forward, I think that will be a key focus for investors.
Just comparing beginning of the year, because we know beginning of the year is relatively slow when it comes to investors coming onto the stock market. But just which counters have stood out for you? Like just looking at the whole period of January and the half of February.
So counters that have stood out, one is Safaricom. We saw it lose ground at the beginning of the year, mainly because of increase in foreign investor outflows, but it has since gained as sentiments improve. I think one of the reasons is just the developments that we've seen in Ethiopia. Safaricom was entering into the Ethiopian market, but now as stability in the region increases, so that's positive for Safaricom. In terms of banks, we've seen Equity, KCB gain. So we could see KCB is trading relatively lower than Equity, where Equity is in its 50s, KCB is in around 46. Usually they trade around the same level, so we expect KCB to increase. We've also seen ABSA, which for a period of around 2 years had been trading close to a 2-year low. And so right now it's gained. We've seen increased momentum on Standard Chartered. And so our view is that we'll see banks continue to increase this year.
We're expecting to see Q4 results for some of those blue chips coming in sometime next week, maybe. Would you see that this will impact any of the counters?
Yes, we should see gains in a number of counters. So currently we're seeing investors take a position ahead of earnings season. Next week, we're likely to see BAT release its results. And so we should see increased activity on BAT. Banks are likely to start releasing it soon, most likely in March. And so, so increased activity in those key counters.
Yeah, we know EABL is still a major manufacturing counter. What's the outlook for it this year?
EABL released last week, and it reported an increase in earnings. And our view is that when they release their full year results, the full year will be really good because of easing of lockdown measures. So comparing this year versus last year, the volumes have really increased, and that has been positive for AIB, and we expect that to continue into full year of 2022.
Yeah, the secondary market has been rather more lucrative comparing to the equities market. What are the predictions for this first quarter going into 2022?
So predictions for earnings, company earnings, we expect just improved earnings across the sector, and especially banks. We could see Safaricom continue to rally. And yeah, I think those will be drivers for the equity market.
Yeah, how about the secondary market? Because we do know that the government could actually release a new bond into the market in the near future. How are we seeing that faring?
On secondary bond market?
Yes.
Yes. So with regards to the secondary bond market, we've seen reduced activity. There is an infrastructure bond that is being issued this month, and it's closing next week. And so activity in the secondary market has really slowed down. Focus is mainly on the infrastructure bond. In terms of liquidity, the market is relatively tight because of the government has been borrowing a lot, and there's liquidity, withdrawing liquidity from the system, and spending has not been as high. So there is relatively less liquidity, and yeah, just a focus on the infrastructure bond that is set to be closed next week. So less activity in the bond secondary market.